I usually slept on the side near the wall. I had been fast asleep for some time when suddenly I awoke to find myself lying on the floor. Too dazed to give the matter any thought, I just climbed back to my side of the bed and fell asleep again. Some minutes later, I again woke up, and once more I was lying on the floor by the far side of the bed. I thought I must be having a nightmare, and, more awake this time, got back into bed. I was still lying half awake when suddenly I felt myself rise into the air and pass over the top of my husband. A moment later, I was unceremoniously bumped to the floor. I became wide awake after this treatment. Putting one hand to the floor in order to pick myself up, I saw it was covered by a white vapour which, when I scooped some in my hand to smell it, I discovered to be smoke. I shouted to Arthur that the house was on fire. Together we rushed downstairs with the children and passed them to safety out of the back window to the yard. The firemen later told us that the sitting room must have been in a state of slow combustion for over 2 hours, for when the door was opened, the whole place burst into roaring flames. Sadly, we surveyed the ruins of our home. What remained of the furniture and walls of the sitting room was charred and blackened, including the chest of drawers, which we had so carefully painted white. It was then we recalled the words Mrs. Kent had uttered 2 nights before. Another aspect of the disaster, however, brought me great comfort. There was now no doubt in my mind that I was under the protection of the spirit world. By dumping me 3 times on the floor to awaken me, my spirit friends have conclusively shown that they have no intention of allowing me to leave this life until my work was done. I had now reached a stage in my physical development where I felt the urge to go into the highways and byways and work among people, trying to bring hope and comfort to their minds and healing to their bodies. I longed to share the light of understanding which had been given to me, and to help to bring into sharper focus the truth which had been demonstrated to mankind nearly 2,000 years before. There began for me a gradual process of the unfolding of the psychic powers necessary for the fulfillment of my mission. This was accomplished not by special training, but simply by opening up my mind to receive impressions from the spirit world, and in so doing becoming the instrument for the exercise of the divine power through Red Cloud. I would like at this point to correct a common misconception of the manner in which spirit guides are sometimes said to treat their mediums. It is frequently suggested that guides force their way through to mediums without any regard for their feelings. I must stress this is emphatically not the case. Red Cloud has always treated me with gentleness and the greatest consideration for my health and well-being. He has never asked me to do anything to which I have not freely given consent. Always he has insisted that not only mediums but all men and women have free will to act as they choose, and with it goes the responsibility for their actions. An interesting example is the case of a young man who came to me seeking proof of survival. He was anxious to get in touch with his father in the spirit world. Red Cloud told him, "I'm sorry, my son, but I cannot bring your father to see you. When he was on earth, he believed that after his death he would sleep until resurrection day. I cannot interfere with his free will. He now sleeps in one of the rest homes in the spirit world." From this, it will be seen that spirit people cannot be called back against their will to communicate with those on earth. They come only if they wish to do so. There can be no questions of raising the dead, as so many people erroneously assert. I began to take many meetings in many districts round London at spiritualist churches at Hampton Hill, Richmond, Surbiton, Wimbledon, to mention only a few, giving clairvoyance, clairaudience, healing, and trance lectures. At Richmond Spiritual Church, a curious incident occurred when a picture was taken by a psychic photographer who, although a non-professional, was operating under test conditions. When the plate was developed, it contained a ray of light in the form of a spear, the head and shaft being clearly distinguishable. It was winter time. There was no sun. There was no window in the direction from which the spear was pointing. I had not seen the spear clairvoyantly when the photograph was taken. I can only surmise that the purpose of its appearance was to symbolize the piercing of darkness, of ignorance, by the light of understanding. From a material aspect, these meetings were anything but remunerative. At the time of which I am writing, it was the custom for mediums to receive 5 shillings for a meeting, out of which they had to pay their own fares. Furthermore, it was no uncommon occurrence for a medium to take both afternoon and evening services without any increase in payment. This did not worry me. However, useful though a little extra money would have been, I was too filled with the zeal of the crusader to look for pecuniary gain. Indeed, I was probably too idealistic and too serious in outlook. It's so easy to become too intense about any subject on which one feels strongly. Because of this, during the early days of my career, at sittings when I was not entranced, and therefore aware of it all, I said, I was sometimes tempted to ignore or dress in greater decorum occasional phrases which shocked me as being flippant or in bad taste. I recalled such an instance when a young woman whose fiancé had been killed came for a sitting. He immediately came through to me. I heard him with perfect clarity repeat the same words over and over again, but as they shocked me, I was reluctant to pass them on to my sitter. Tell me, I asked her, was he a man who used strong language? Not especially, she replied. Why do you ask? What is he saying? Well, I said dubiously, he keeps on saying, not bloody likely, not bloody likely. She laughed happily at this and told me they had agreed that whoever died first should try to come back and give as a password the famous phrase from Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion. I soon learned that the spirit people behave just as naturally and individually as we do. By passing over, they do not suddenly become paragons of all the virtues, as some people seem to think. They retain their mortal characteristics, and to all intents and purposes are the same people they were on earth, except they have discarded ailing, injured, or worn-out bodies in exchange for perfect spirit bodies. Red Cloud loves laughter, which he says creates harmony. He has a sparkling and delighted sense of fun, which he frequently brings into play when he feels the atmosphere of a sitting is becoming too tense. I remember one lady who moved in elevated society circles and always exquisitely dressed in the height of fashion once asked him, Red Cloud, why is it that so many of the guides are Indians with painted faces? She did not mean this unkindly. It was a genuine question which, incidentally, had been asked many times. Should the Indian not paint his face? Red Cloud replied with a twinkle. Do you not do the same? The tenseness of the séance at once dissolved in laughter. At another sitting, when the atmosphere had become charged with emotion, Red Cloud suddenly interposed. 2 days ago, others of my race approached me saying, Come quickly, there are those who would scalp your medium. I went with them and found her seated in a chair, with her hair attached to a machine. I looked, but she was well and happy, so I went away. I was, of course, at the hairdresser's, having my hair permanently waved. Another example of spirit identification by a prearranged password was when a lady came bringing a personal object which had belonged to someone she loved. She hoped that with its aid she might receive a communication. In the course of the sitting, I became mystified when the only word I could hear was rabbits, repeated several times. The sitter asked if there was any message for her. I replied there was, though I doubted whether I could it could possibly interest her. Somewhat diffidently, I told her all I had received was the word rabbits. But that is the very word my husband and I agreed upon as evidence of identification, she exclaimed triumphantly. After that, I was no longer surprised at any message which came from the spirit world. It was at Richmond Spiritual Church in 1925 that Red Cloud first controlled me. A small group was sitting with me in an experiment to discover the extent of my psychic powers. I was not in a deep trance and therefore had some knowledge of what was happening. It was as though I was partly present, partly detached. No doubt Red Cloud chose this semi-trance state to give me confidence before entrancing me fully when all consciousness is withdrawn. You've been listening to a reading of 50 Years a Medium by Estelle Roberts, read by Cassandra Recovered. Thank you. Take care.